Hey craft buddies, I am switching up the scenery today. We are outside in the sunshine. I'm rocking the messy bun and we are breaking out our power tools because it's Christmas in July. So I've got some new, affordable, and adorable wood projects all for the holiday season. And the best part about these is you can either make them to keep them or you could sell them for a profit. You're watching Whiskey and Whit. My name is Whitney, and a huge welcome back to my Whiskey Craft buddies who are here each and every week to DIY with me. I love to do these Christmas and July projects now versus when it gets cold here in Illinois, and this has become a tradition, so if you like what you see today, I've got a ton more wood builds for Christmas decor that I will share with you down below. Now let's get into it.
Every time that I'm going to do wood projects, I always shop my house first. So if I need wood, I'll go get it, but I have this scrap pile, and a lot of times I have what I need already because I make so many wood projects. And the first one is inspired by this 18-inch wood round I stained last year and never got around to. If you guys remember, in my home tour last year, you saw my gingerbread, hot cocoa, Christmas sweets themed dining room. And so when I saw this wood round, I'm like, we're getting it out of the garage and we're going to make something for this setup. So the first thing I had to do was clean it off because it was a little nasty and dirty from the garage, but I got the cobwebs off and then it was time to paint. I pulled up a picture of a gingerbread face that I liked on Pinterest. This is how I'm able to paint. I need a reference photo. So I started by using my little chalk paint container and marking eyes, nose, and cheeks. And then we're going to start with the blush of my cute little gingerbread person. So I made the circles and I buffed it in with my finger, and you're probably like, what in the Raggedy Ann is going on here? Here's a picture if you don't get my reference, but just trust the process. I promise you're going to love it. So then I grabbed a makeup brush, and I learned this from Courtney at Creative on the Cheap. Courtney and I feel like influence each other to buy things all the time for our craft space because one will use something and they'll be like, yeah, we need that. So Eco Tools brushes, I will link them, but thank you, Courtney, because this is the first time I've used them and they are awesome. So once I get the face and everything, I'm going to use the end of my paintbrush to add some kind of sparkle to the eyes, and then also a little makeup brush for the eyelashes. Add some white to the cheeks as well as the nose, and this is what's really going to give it dimension and make it look more like a gingerbread. I think gingerbread girl because she's got eyelashes like this. Then I took another makeup brush. I did the squiggle that you usually see on gingerbread around the outside. And then I wanted to add a little bit of highlight underneath the nose because I had done the darker up above. I started with the darker because that's what was in the picture and it turned out. Now because I want to use this and put stuff on top of it, like a tray, I wanted to seal it. So I did 3 coats of spray polyacrylic. And the key here is when you're using spray, I also like to have a brush on hand just to level it out. Depending on the brand, it may self-level, but that just makes it so it sits down. Now we're going to get fancy here and we're going to grab some Lazy Susan hardware and turn this into a gingerbread Lazy Susan. So I grabbed this one from Home Depot. I will link it down below. I usually get them from Menards and I didn't read this one. This one didn't come with hardware. So thank goodness I had screws on hand, but if you get them from Lowe's or Menards, maybe even Home Depot had one with hardware. I don't know. I was just in a hurry and I didn't read. Shocker. But I had the screws. So just keep that in mind when you're buying it. It's as easy as measuring the center, putting it on, and you've got a fun Lazy Susan. I love this. I am pretty proud of myself for the painting. And I know if you're not a big painter, you'll probably look at this and think, I definitely can't do that. I promise you, you can. Just give yourself some pencil marks and just kind of follow along as you go. And also, if for some reason you don't like it, just get some brown paint, paint over it, and then try again. A lot of times we're really scared to make mistakes. I know I'm starting to sew and it's hard to not be, good at something right away, but I promise you, you will enjoy it. Give it a try. If you're loving the Christmas inspo, you are going to love the fact that this video is part of a large collab. So not only myself, but all these other creators are sharing Christmas inspiration today. There will be a full playlist down below, and all this is hosted by my friend Shannon over at the Cozy Christmas Cottage. If she looks familiar, that's because she's also the face behind the Daily DIYer. She's got 2 channels, and she kicks off the Cozy Christmas Cottage every year with this collab in July. So be sure to check out both the playlist for all the videos, as well as both of Shannon's channels. A huge thank you to her for having me, and you're definitely not going to want to miss this playlist. Look at this lineup. It's going to be awesome. This next one is super fun because you can change it out for any season, not just Christmas. So we're going to start in the fencing section, and I'm going to grab one of these pine post skirts as well as a flat top post cap next to it. So that's going to be about $12. You can also grab a finial if you'd rather do that. And then I am grabbing this fence post. It's $16 and I used it for my outside hanging sign post I did a couple years ago. And it is just the perfect size. You don't have to cut it. Then I am also going to grab some 1x4 boards because we're going to be making some directional signs, and I think a 1x4 is a good size. This is a 2x6 that we had left over from when I built my dining room table. It's all kind of wonky and this edge isn't straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to level this off so it's a straight cut, and then I'm going to cut 6 inches. So we've got a 6-inch square that's 2-inch thick. So that's going to give us about an inch around the outside to be the base of our post. So here's what we're working with. I've got my post. You could also use a 4x4 that you cut down. My saw is just not big enough to cut through a 4x4. I've got my piece that I just cut. So this is going to be the base. I've got this rim for some extra. It's got like trim, like some little like base trim, extra pizzazz. And then I've got this. So this I'm going to use as a lid that is removable because at Home Depot I found this. A solar light, so I am going to be able to swap it in and out if I want this to match the wood, how I'm going to finish it, or I can put the solar light on. Now, I need to figure out how big I want my signs to be because I'm going to make these interchangeable for different seasons. So this was just scrap I had in the garage, but I think this is probably a good size, maybe a little bit shorter. And then you can either do the arrows at the end, which I'll show you how to do. They're just 45-degree cuts, or you can just make them straight across. I cut all my pieces to 18 inches. You want to add an arrow end. All you're going to do is measure across, measure the center, cut a 45-degree angle off of one corner from the edge to the center, and then you're going to cut a 45-degree angle on the other side. I like to take the scrap from that first angle that I cut off and measure it, so then that way you have a mirrored cut. Then it's as easy as sanding everything down. We're going to assemble this post by adding that little square that we cut out of the 2x6. I'm going to do wood glue. I just measured an inch from the outside and I used some trim head nails, about 5 of them, to hook it down. Then I also used some wood glue to add that skirting. This is optional, but I think it adds a little extra pizzazz. And then I'm going to stain the entire thing in dark walnut. And the cap I'm not going to attach because I want to be able to switch it out for that solar topper. I'm also going to seal the entire thing with some spray sealant. Then I'm going to paint the wood pieces whatever color I want the background to be with a chippy brush. So I'm going to do some fall ones and some Christmas ones. So I did white and red and orange. Then before I apply my vinyl decal, I'm going to spray some polyacrylic just so then that way my vinyl has something to stick to, and I'm going to cut out the words. You could hand draw this. You could also get stencils if you don't have a Cricut. There's a variety of different ways you could customize this. Then I'm going to apply them to the pieces of wood, and then I'm going to seal it with a coat of Mod Podge. I'm actually going to do 2 coats, and that is going to make it so it's not going to pop up. Then this is the fun part. We're going to make it interchangeable. So I am going to take my post that's been sealed and dried, and I'm going to add some of this industrial Velcro. It holds up to 10 pounds. My wood is not that heavy. So I'm going to trim it down so it fits directly onto my post. I'm going to stick that down and I'm going to stick my sign right on top. You can measure to see kind of where you want everything to land. But then you're going to stick it down, let it sit. It says 15 minutes. I gave it a half an hour. And then you can easily peel them off and replace them. That is so fun because I am going to have Christmas, fall. I can do a bunch of different ones. So on one side, I did 4 pieces of Velcro so that I could do 4 wording signs. And on the back, I did 3 for the arrows at the bottom. And then I added just this little hook I got from Amazon. Now I can add a wreath as well as the 3 signs, and watch how easy it is to switch. And then if you want just the signs, you flip it around and you stick whatever signs you have on there. This is totally customizable, and this is another thing that would be really easy to sell. And you can offer kind of a mix and match bundle where you can make a bunch of these signs and then they can pick out whichever ones that they want. Make sure you're going to seal it with an exterior sealant if you are going to be using this outside. Mine's going to live in my house, so the Mod Podge and the interior sealant is fine, but keep that in mind if you're selling them and people are going to put them outside. Up next, we are going to grab some wood from the store. I grabbed a 1x6 common board for under $8, and I'm going to show you how you can turn it into this adorable snowman box.
I've got my 1x6, and the first measurement is going to be how wide we want our box to be. So this is going to be the bottom. So I'm going to cut the bottom to 9 inches. We've got our 9-inch bottom. Then I'm going to take it sideways and measure so I can have 2 sides. This way, this is going to be the right length once you attach it so that you can have a face frame of wood. So this, even though it's a 1x6, it's like 5 something. So I like to just go ahead and use the piece of wood to measure. We're going to cut this, and then we're going to cut the same length again for either side. So because I want the mirror, I'm just going to stack it, draw a line, and cut on that line again. So now that we've got your 2 sides and your bottom, you want your front and your back piece to be the width of this, because it's going to be like a face frame. So you need it to incorporate this side, this 9 inches, and then this width over here. So what I like to do is line it up and measure, and here we're looking at about 10.5. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces at 10.5, and that's going to be the front and the back.
And ta-da, you have cut your box. Now we need that fun little nose for our snowman, and I'm going to use a scrap piece of wood. You can use scrap 1x6, draw a rough shape and cut it out. If you don't have a jigsaw, you can make one with cardboard, and I'm actually going to show you how you can do that in a little bit. But if you do cut it out of wood, use your power sander to sand everything, as well as sanding down the edges of that nose. You want those to be rounded. Anywhere where it feels sharp, sand it down. Then you're going to take your bottom 9-inch board that we cut, take one of your side pieces. Remember, you want those cut edges to face out, add some wood glue, and nail them down. If you don't have a brad nailer, you can use a hammer and nails if you want, or you could also screw them in. You just will see the screw heads. Then you are going to flip it, add your front and back, and then it is time to finish it. So I started by staining mine dark walnut. That's optional if you want to just paint your box white for your snowman, but I wanted a rustic layered look, so I started with the stain, and then I used a chippy brush and some white chalk paint to brush on the top. I did the front, back, 2 sides, as well as the top. I left the inside just the dark color, and then I painted my nose orange. While my chippy paint was drying, I added a little bit more orange to the bottom of the nose and buffed in some brown. This is going to give a shadow to the underside of the nose. And then once that looked how I wanted, I added some more orange to the top, and I did the same thing but with white to add a highlight. Now you're not really going to see the under part of the nose, but you are going to see the top part of the nose. So I extended that up to the top, and then I did a little bit of shadow on the back part. I didn't worry about doing any of this to the back because you're just going to glue it onto the box. Now my last step was to take that highlight brush and kind of just go across the front to blend it all in. And this is one of those processes where you kind of just have to mess with it until you like it. And the great thing about this is if you do something you don't like, go ahead and cover it with orange and start again. Then I mixed some white acrylic paint with some baking soda to add a fun faux snow effect. So I started with the nose and my stippling brush, and I added it on the edge so it looked like snow landed on his nose. I also added a couple like white splatters, but that wasn't cutting it, so I decided to add this as well. Then I'm also going to continue that on the top of the box and down the side of the box. So we've got some texture, so it looks like, you know, he's been sitting outside and getting snowed on. Then I'm going to put my nose where I want it to lay, but we haven't hooked it down yet, and here's why. We're going to mark where it is, just so then that way you can put it right back where it is, and we're going to add a good chunk of the mouth. Then I'm going to remove it and add the cheeks where they should go, so then that way I can put the nose back and see how it kind of overlaps that cheek. I like that look, so I wanted to make sure I could overlap before I stuck it down, because if not, you might get red paint on your nose. Then I'm just using the end of my paintbrush like I did for the gingerbread. I'm adding 2 larger eyes, and then I am going to use hot glue and super glue to glue the nose down. My last step for painting was to add 2 little dots to his eyes, and then I had these handles in my craft room that I bought for another project, and I really liked them because they were like hammered metal. I took a piece of painter's tape, pushed it onto the end, so then that way I could stick this on my box and know where to drill my holes. I drilled holes large enough so that my screws could fit in, and I added the hardware just like if you were switching out handles on a dresser. Then my last step was to seal everything, especially with that baking soda mixture. I didn't want that to flake off, so I did 3 coats of this poly triple thick. You could also use clear spray paint if you don't have this. Just know you want matte or gloss depending on the look you're going for. Now this would be so cute for a variety of different things. It would be great for a party. You can put utensils and stuff that people could grab there, general decor, but this would also make a really cute container for a gift. You could do a hot cocoa gift, a self-care gift, and then they can also keep the box. I am so happy with how this turned out, and I'm definitely going to be making more because it's super easy and they're going to make great gifts this holiday season. I could also see these selling like hotcakes at a vendor fair. For this next one, we are going to grab some 2x4 by 8 pieces of wood. Here's the current price this past week at my Home Depot, $3.65. This is a whitewood stud, and these were really good quality. They didn't have a lot of chunks out of them. So for this one, you're going to do some beveled cuts, and this is another thing that can be scary. Make sure you watch a couple videos and know the safety features of your saw. But this is going to be something that once you do it, you're going to be really proud of, because I haven't done a lot of beveled cuts, but it's pretty straightforward. You can also flip your wood and cut through the meat of it. If you don't want to have to bevel, you can just do an angled cut, but my saw isn't big enough for that. So if you've got a smaller saw like me, FYI. We're going to be cutting these from some long point to long point and some long point to short point. So if you see on the plans for this, if you're doing long point to long point, you're going to cut and flip. So you have perpendicular lines like this. If you're doing long point to short point, you are going to just slide your wood down and cut parallel. So keep that in mind. Now, once I got cutting, I realized that my angles were wrong and I had made a mistake. Alright, craft buddies, you know I like to keep it real. I accidentally cut the wrong angles because I'm in a hurry trying to get this done during nap times and such, and I made some wrong cuts, so I wasted some wood, and that's okay. It happens. I've been doing this for quite some time now, and you still make mistakes, so don't get too frustrated. Just toss them and move on. So after I went back and fixed my issue, then it was smooth sailing. This is the project where I am going to just show you the cuts versus having to explain it as I'm cutting, just because that's going to make it a lot easier. You're going to have 2 45-degree cuts, and we are making some 2x4 Christmas trees. These were all over my For You page last year, and I was way too pregnant, and it was too cold for me to do this in November when I wanted them. So I was like, Christmas in July, these are happening. Once we have our 22.5-degree here, we are going to go long point to short point, which means they're parallel cuts. So I'm going to flip it on its side, put my tape measure right here at the point, and I'm going to measure, I need 14 inches for this one. So I'm going to measure to 14 inches here, and I'm going to kind of wrap it around so I can see it when I lay this down. And I'm going to flip it and make sure that I'm going to be cutting parallel with that other cut. Okay, so if you watch as I pull down my saw, you're going to see just the lightest, you're going to see a light little line there. You want to line that up, so then that way you know that it's going to be long point to short point. Now I ended up making a 4-foot, a 3-foot, and a 2-foot tree, and here are the measurements for the angles. So if you need to pause and screenshot, you can do that. So like I said, the top 2 angles where it makes the top of the tree is 45-degree cuts, and then the rest of these are going to be 22.5. So once you cut those top 2, you can leave your saw at 22.5 degrees and just power through. So for these, I'm going to use trim head screws, and when I wanted to make these, I went through a bunch of different plans, and the ones that I found that were the best are either Anna White or a site called Woodcraft Blueprints. So I will link those down below if you want to check them out. But she used trim head screws at Woodcraft Blueprints, and I liked that it kind of sunk into the wood. So the key here is when you're assembling everything, you want to mark the angle of your screws, because if you look here, if you go straight across, it's not going to go from the meat of one side to the meat of the other side. So I lined it up, and then you want to get them started. That helps, so then that way when you're driving them in, you're not at a wonky angle, because it's kind of hard to see. The other thing I did is I kind of played around with where to put an additional piece of wood to help me grip, and this helped. So grab another piece from your tree and use it to kind of hold it together. Once I got that top one together, it was honestly smooth sailing. For your small tree, you're going to measure down 1.5 inches on either side, and then you're going to want to make sure that your angle at the bottom is sitting flat like this, so flip it around till it gets like that. If you're doing the two larger trees, the overlap is 2 inches. So once you mark it, then you can get everything set. And if I could, I used the screws on the inside so that they were kind of hidden. But some of them, because of how tight it was on the inside, you had to screw from the outside. But these are going to be rustic trees, so I'm not super worried about the fact that you're going to see screws. So just something to keep in mind. Then I continued to work down 1.5 or 2 inches, depending on how big your tree is. And then you are going to have your bottom piece that you cut. It's going to line up nicely. Use 4 screws. Again, make sure you're going from the meat of one to the other. Screw that in. And then I lined up that bottom piece. I just measured halfway across my bottom of my tree and halfway across the bottom of my little stand at the bottom. Line those up and then screwed that in with 4 screws as well. Now the first one, I had some trial and error, especially like where to balance and where to hold the tree. Once I did the medium and large size, it was smooth sailing, and then I got all of them put together. Now here's where you can get really creative. You can finish them however you want. I went to Home Depot and I met the sweetest lady at the paint counter named Mary. She helped me out. I got a little sample of Bare and Matte, and I used this alfalfa extract. Just go find a color that you like, and we are going to make a green stain. So I ended up doing the smallest and the largest tree in this green stain, and I did the same thing I would if it was stained. So I applied it with a paintbrush and then wiped it off, so then that way you're going to see the wood grain through it. Now if I were to do this again, I would get a darker green color because this came out a little lighter, but I still like it. But just FYI, if you want them to be darker, don't go with the alfalfa color, pick a darker green. The middle one I stained in dark walnut, and then I used my Varathane sealer, sprayed the whole thing, and made sure I had my paintbrush on hand to level off any pieces. I absolutely love how these turned out. I cannot wait to put these either on the porch or near my fireplace in the house. And I also like that you get more bang for your buck because you can use these well into winter. They're not just Christmas. You can also add some nails to them so that they could be a wreath holder. And the reason I did the coloring like I did is so I could combine them in a bunch of different ways. So depending on the area that you're decorating, you could do a variety of different ones. From what I've seen online, these sell super well, so they're not super hard to put together. So something to keep in mind if you're trying to make some extra money this holiday season. After I put together those trees, I had some scrap 2x4, so I ended up cutting them down into 3 different pieces, and I didn't really pay attention. I just cut off the angles so they were flat. I had 1 smaller and 2 larger. So the first thing I needed to do was decide which one was going to be what, and so I decided that my 2 larger ones were going to be a snowman and a Santa Claus, and my smaller one was going to be a gingerbread girl. So I started with some white chalk paint, and I painted both of the large ones white to give me a snowman base, but then also to give me a primer for my Santa Claus. And then I also used some brown paint that looks like chocolate. I think the color is milk chocolate, and I painted that one. For the gingerbread girl, we're going to follow the same process that we did earlier for that Lazy Susan. So I just pulled up an inspo pick and painted it just on a smaller scale. Then I grabbed some red felt and some red gingham fabric to make a bow. I just glued this together, gathered the center of both of them with some little hair elastics, and then I made a little strip to glue around the front. I glued that right on the top, and then the dots I just made on the top and bottom with the end of a paintbrush. Now for our snowman. Remember earlier when I said you could easily make a nose out of cardboard? It's as easy as cutting it out with scissors and painting it orange, especially if you're going to keep the item inside. It is the perfect way to get a 3D shape, little to no tools, little to no cost. Then onto the snowman, I took some red fabric because I'm trying to do a Christmas themed grouping here, so I wanted the red to tie them all together. And I cut some of this fabric I've had for years. I kind of hemmed the one edge with hot glue. I wrapped it around the top and hooked the hat on. Then I gathered the top with a rubber band, and then I cut slits in that extra fabric to create a pom-pom. Once my slits were where I wanted, I kind of gave it a haircut, so then that way the pom-pom would be where I wanted it. And then I added a cute little face and some blush cheeks, just like I did earlier. I ended up adding some shading, so mixing some brown and some white. I added that also to the nose. I did a paint marker and made some dots, and then I just kind of did what I was feeling with lines around the outside. And then to finish it off, I ripped some rag ribbon from fabric. You just create a slit and rip it, and I gave him a cute little scarf to match. I also updated the cheeks because they were a little too pink for me, so I muted them and they were much more what I was going for. And finally, for our Santa Claus. So it took me a couple tries to get a skin tone that I liked because I didn't have that on hand, so I had to mix one. I finally did like orange, a little bit of brown, a little bit of pink, a little bit of white. I wasted a lot of paint, as you can see, but I got a color that I liked. And then I also cut a nose out of cardboard. Now we're going to start with Santa's hat, and I glued a piece of burlap to kind of hem it. And then I started with some nautical rope from Dollar Tree. I saw an adorable tutorial on TikTok for the Santa Claus, and I knew I had to take my own liberties and make my own. And so I took a pick and started combing it so this looked more like Santa's beard. I used hot glue, and I started with kind of like the mustache area. I glued it down, and I'm untwisting as I'm sticking it down with the hot glue. And then I'm also going to add the bottom part of the beard, just cutting as I go and making sure that I comb everything out. Then I also did a longer piece for around the top so I could have a hairline and hair on either side of his face for the beard. And then I started to glue my hat. I kind of glued it down like a present, and as I'm folding, I want the front tip to be kind of pointy, so then that way I can add another piece to make it look like a Santa hat. Once that's all glued down, I am gluing another strip of burlap, and I'm going to fold the corner in to kind of have it sit like a hat. And then this process is kind of trust the process. I'm gluing it down so it sits how I want it, and then I use my pom-pom maker to create a white pom-pom. Once the pom-pom was glued down, I gave him a haircut. I added a face, and then I also added some white chiffon ribbon around the top with hot glue to be the kind of white strip of the hat. I love these. They turned out so cute, and these are going to be perfect for my gingerbread hutch this year. That's going to do it for this installment of Christmas in July. I hope you loved these wood projects. Be sure to let me know down in the comments your favorite, and also be sure to check out the full collab playlist. I will link that for you as well. Thanks so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of Christmas in July, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!